Oz, and if you guys are wondering why you're seeing like such a profile pic, this is how I record me doing vlogs whenever I'm not using my phone or iPad or something. So if it's blurry, I know it's blurry like all the time. I'm sorry about that. It's because of this. Anyways, today I was just like really bored. It's 4:27. I went to church, got home around 12:30ish. And then I was just bored watching YouTube all day, working on my homework, and it's just been crazy and boring day, basically. So, I just felt like recording, talking to you guys because I love y'all. You guys are my life. Thank you so much. Let's move my computer back. Today, to pass up the time, I'm not just going to sit here and like stare at you guys because this is actually going to make my day better because I'm finally going to do something. Sorry if I sound stuffed up. I think I'm starting to get sick or something. Anyways, we're going to be reading a book called The Unwanted. It is The Hunger Game meets Harry Potter. The author is Lisa McMain or whatever. The author of the book, she's the author of the book 3 in the Infinity Ring series, and it's a New York Times best-selling author. Let's read what this is about. And this isn't just going to be like a reading with Keiko where I read the first chapter. This is going to be a reading with Keiko where we're going to read the whole book. Not in one episode, obviously, but we're going to try to get a couple pages done. I have to read 100 pages a day of each book, so I might read 100 pages, but in different videos, because this is already almost 2 minutes, and it's taking us this long to explain what we're doing today and why. Anyways, let's read the back. The Unwanted. Every year in Quill, 13-year-olds are sorted into categories. The strong, intelligent, wanteds go to the university, and the artistic unwanteds are sent to their graves. On the day of the purge, identical twins, Alex and Aaron Stowe, await their fate. While Aaron is hopeful of becoming a wanted, Alex knows his chances are slim. He's been caught drawing with a stick in the dirt, and in the stark gray land of Quill, being creative is a death sentence. But when Alex and the other unwanteds face the Eliminators, they discover an eccentric magician named Mr. Today and his hidden world that exists to save the condemned children. Urtami is a colorful place of talking statues, uncommon creatures, and artistic magic, where creativity is considered a gift and a weapon. So I got 3 of these unwanteds. This is obviously the first book. This is, again, what the cover looks like. If you guys, by the end of this video, you like reading with Keiko, I'm going to try to read with, expressions and stuff. So if you guys like that, please hit the like button, and I'll do more, and we can read together. We're definitely going to finish this book, but each video of this may be 30 minutes or more, so I don't know how it's going to be. Obviously, you guys know how long it is, but right now, for me, it's 3 minutes and 25 seconds. So, let me just take a drink of water. Let's get started. We're not going to read the acknowledgement, but Chapter 1, The Purge. Here's what it looks like. Okay. There was a hint of wind coming over the top of the stone walls through the barbed wire sky on the day Alexander Stowe was to be purged. Alex waited in the dusty commons of the Quill and felt the light breeze cooling the sweat on his upper lip. His twin brother Aaron stood beside him, their parents behind, and all around the entire community of Quill watched and waited, the bland looks of sleeping fish on their faces. Mr. Stowe pressed his finger hard. Sorry guys, technical difficulties there. And all around the entire community of Quill watched and waited, the bland looks of sleepy fish on their faces. Mr. Stowe pressed his finger hard into Alex's back, a final poke into his kidneys. A last goodbye, Alex thought, or a warning not to run. Alex glanced at Aaron, whose face showed the tiniest emotion. Scared, was it, or sad? Alex didn't know. The high priest, Justine, her long white hair undisturbed despite the breeze, rose to her full height and observed the silent crowd. She began without instruction or ado, for the purge was neither exciting nor boring. It just was, as many things were, in Quill. were nearly 50 I'm studying so much. There were nearly 50 13-year-olds this year. The people of Quill waited to hear which of these teenagers had been marked as wanted or necessary, and by the process of elimination, which of them remained to be purged. Alex scanned the group of their families around the giant half circle of the amphitheater. He knew some of them, not all. Alex's mind wandered as the high priest Justine announced first names to the wanteds, and started only slightly as the high priest spoke Aaron's name. Aaron, who had nothing to worry about, sighed away in relief when he was among the 15 names called. The necessaries were next. 13 names were read. Alexander Stowe was not one of those either. Even though Alex knew he was unwanted, and had known ever since his parents had told him over breakfast when he was 10, the knowledge and the 3 years of preparation were not enough to stop the sweat that prickled his arms now. It was down to more formality, unless there was a surprise, which there sometimes was, but it didn't matter. Everyone stood motionless until the final 20 names were called. Among the unwanted, Alexander Stowe. Alex didn't move, though his heart felt like a cement block into his gut. He stared straight ahead as he'd seen the others unwanted do in the past years. His lip quivered for a moment, but he fought to still it. When the governors came over to him, he put his arms out for them to shackle with rusty iron bands. He made his eyes icy cold before he glanced over his shoulder at his parents, who remained unemotional. His father nodded slightly, and finally took his fingers out of Alex's back after the shackles were secure. There was a minor relief, but what did it matter now? Aaron sniffed once quietly, catching Alex's attention in the silent amphitheater. The identical boys held a glance for a moment. Something like a jolt of energy passed between them, and then it was gone. "Goodbye," Aaron whispered. Alex swallowed hard, held the stare a second more as the governors tugged at him to follow, and then broke the connection and went with the governors to a waiting bus that would take them to his death. Aaron Stowe, the wanted, watched his brother. Alex boarded the rusty box of the bus, and then he turned his eyes to the formidable high priest Justine. She retreated to her aging jeep-like vehicle, flanked by 2 guards and the security. They had begun the drive back up to the Destiny Hill of the palace, leaving a trail of gray smoke and sharp odor to linger in the heavy air. The rest of the Quill slowly dispersed on foot. Chapter 2. Wanted. I don't know if I said that before, but this is Chapter 2. Mummers surfaced and drifted through the crowd. Not about the purge, of course. That was already a cloudy memory for some. Instead, they spoke of their plans for the rest of the day, for the day of the purge was Quill's one holiday each year. All the wanted and most of the necessaries, except those who tended to the farm animals, were free to do as they pleased for the rest of it. Aaron knew what he would be doing. He turned to his mother and father and said with a decisive air, "All set, then." Miss Stowe nodded primly, and 3 of them followed the crowd down the dusty path that led to the Quadrant 4, where they lived. We're finished making your uniform and get your things packed for the university," she said. "Cut your hair, too." She looked at Mr. Stowe and asked, "I don't suppose we'll get the unwanted boys' clothes and shoes back, will we?" Mr. Stowe, who had been quite handsome, but now had curled up a bit from the years of back-breaking work as a barrier, shook his head. "No." "Well, that's a waste. Aaron could use them, the shoes at least, which I thought to take them before he left." "I wouldn't want to wear them," Aaron said, and then he pinched his lips together before he said more. So his mother narrowed his eyes and spoke softly, almost fearfully. "You'll do well to forget about him." Aaron kept silent for a moment, thinking. "You're right," he said finally. "It won't happen again." "See to it," said Mr. Stowe. After 15 minutes they reached Quadrant 4, a residential square mile of tiny, identical houses, planted closely together like rows of sweet corn. Each house the color of the dry, crackled desert that had surrounded it. The crowd of the people split up now and weaved their way between the structures until they reached their own individual homes. Aaron and his parents nodded politely to the neighbors as they walked along. When Aaron saw a familiar couple around the same age as his parents walking alone, he touched his mother's sleeve. "How old?" he said. "Isn't Mr. Ranger a milker?" "Yes," she said. "Why is he out about instead of doing his job?" Aaron's eyes narrowed. "He must have been given the day off this year because of the unwanted daughter. Did they know an advice, I wonder?" He turned to Mr. Stowey. "Not that I heard. It's a blow." Mr. Stowey, he yawned as they neared the house, number 54 through 43. They'd be cut off from reproducing now. This was their second offense. Mr. Stowey wrinkled his nose. They'd be completely reducted to the one-tits for poor production. So guys, basically to sum up what's happening so far, sorry, my nose is getting so stuffy, and I tried to turn on the light so I could see better, but it's fine. Okay, so basically what's happening so far is his brother, so Aaron's brother, I'm pretty sure, this is Aaron, yeah, Aaron's brother is being taken away to be killed on a bus because he had like a creative mind and stuff. And this guy is out here, who's a milker, and his name is Mr. Ranger. So Mr. Ranger is out here, and he's just out and about with his wife. And I guess their daughter and their kid before that are unwanted. And they're going to be cut off from being able to have any more children because of two of their kids having the offense of being creative. So they're not going to be able to have any more kids anymore. And sorry, I have to take another drink. So that's basically what's happening right now. And they're saying for poor production. If you guys didn't understand. Miss Stowey gave her husband a disapproving glance. "You be careful what you say," she snapped, "lest you forget. We've a wanted in our presence now." Aaron raised his chin slightly as his parents stood aside at the front door, allowing the boy to enter before them for the first time. "Yes, be careful, father," Aaron said coolly, "or I'll have to report you for insubordination for a comment like that." Aaron took on a dignified stride as he made his way through the tiny kitchen to the even tinier bedroom that he no longer had to share. It's true, he thought. Enough mourning. Alex has been likely eliminated by now. The twinge in his gut was soon dulled by the thoughts of his now secured future, and a tiny surge of power. He was Aaron Stowey, the wanted, and he had a lot more to prove than most, having been born of necessities, not to mention overcoming the stigma of worthlessness twin brother. It was, Aaron knew, a huge accomplishment to have made it to the top like this. He had begun to pack his suitcase, a satisfied feeling growing inside him, for tonight would be his last night living with his necessary parents. Tomorrow he would go to the university to be with the others of the evaluated status. So, sorry, I'm going to sum that page up real quick. So basically, he has a bunch of power now because he's the necessary. They need him. So that's why he was like threatening his dad there for a second, or his necessary parents or whatever. And now he has a surge of power. So let's see where this is going. The Death Farm. No one spoke during the 15-minute bus ride to the Death Farm. So this has changed perspective to Alex's perspective instead of Aaron's now, to clear that up. It was stingingly hot. Flies buzzed and darted at the closed windows, unable to escape. When Alex pulled out of his deep daze, he wiped the sweat off his forehead with his upper arm and looked around the bus. In front of Alex, connected to him by a long chain over the high-backed bus seats, was his neighbor and friend, Megan Ranger. It was a bit of a shock to see her in this group. She'd had only one infraction, as far as he knew, but it was the double, singing and dancing. Alex had witnessed it, but it wasn't he who had reported her. She'd been a pretty voice, too, but Alex was not permitted to think about that. Despite the heat, Megan's face was as white as the moon. Across the bus aisle was Samhead Burkish, who was well known to Alex, but not necessarily well liked by him. Alex was surprised to see him here too, since the boy had privately boasted to Alex and Aaron only last week that he was going to be in the Quinterly. Sam Head was obviously fighting tears and glared furiously when Alex's eyes landed on him. "What are you looking at?" Sam Head said. But one of the younger governors gave Sam Head a warning look. Unwanteds were not allowed to speak. Their last words had already been uttered before the purge. Alex dropped his eyes and took in a few breaths, vowing silently not to look at Sam Head again until, well, ever. Instead, he turned his gaze to the seat behind his own, not having noted in the shock of it all who was attached to the other arm. He had nearly had to stand in order to see over the high seat back to where the chain led. But he didn't, since the governors were watching. All he could see was straight black hair and a big watery blue eyes of someone who had to be a girl. But a tiny girl for 13, he thought. She didn't turn away. Instead, she held his gaze, blinking away her tears only once during a long moment. Her eyes were deep and soulful, with wet black lashes as lumped together from crying. After a moment, Alex attempted a half smile. He doubted that she could see his mouth if he couldn't see hers, but her eyes crinkled the tiniest bit in response, and for some reason it made Alex feel just a little bit good. There was no one else on the rickety old bus that Alex knew. He thought for a moment about being here alone with the governors, and for some selfish reason he couldn't quite explain, he felt a rush of something glad, knowing Megan and the others were with him. There he wasn't the only unwanted to the entire land of Quill. The bus chugged past the nursery where all the Quill's trees stood. Past the cattle ranch on the way out of town, and along the stark, dingy, gray south wall of Quill for several minutes before the Equality Bland houses disappeared and the land grew untended and docile. Alex's stomach churned when the drivers braked and the bus slowly groaned to a stop in front of the black, solid iron gates of what the people of Quill called the Death Farm. None but the highest priest, Justine, and the governors had ever been inside the gates and returned alive. They didn't speak of it. Only the people of Quill, in hushed voices, would talk about it now and then, and speculate about how long you might have held there before the Eliminators disposed of you. And just how did they do it? Was it painful? Did they sedate you before tossing you into the Greek lake of boiling oil? Alex tried hard not to think of these things, but the harder he tried, the more he thought of them. And so it was almost with relief that he heard the bus doors creak open and the governors tell all the unwanteds to stand and disembark. There was a distant smell, pungent, when children walked off the bus and gathered along the black gate that led to the farm. It was an uncommon odor, different from the fried smells that came from the Quinterly vehicles. Alex assumed it was burning oil wafting off the nearby lake. He had never been this close to it before. Since no one was allowed near it, no one could even see the lake, because the towering cement walls that surrounded the land reached all the way up to the barbed wire ceiling, 40 feet above. No one, that is, except the unwanteds. Alex glanced at the black-haired, blue-eyed girl next to him. The protective barbed wire ceiling that crisscrossed and covered the entire land of Quill made a shadow box on her own face, capturing a tear. She shook silently. She was not 13, Alex decided. In a brave moment with nothing to lose, he whispered, "I'm Alex. It'll go quickly." He wasn't sure why he said that. It was the only comforting thing he could think of. She blinked and turned her face up to him, making the shadow boxes race down her face like they did across everything everywhere. "Lena," she whispered, and shook her head. "And no, it won't." Alex didn't know what to say. He stood at attention as the governor took a key from the string around her neck and unlocked the gate. "Summon the Eliminators," the woman said. Another governor obliged by pounding on the gate. When the enormous gate creaked open, the governor stepped away and began boarding the bus again. Lena watched them go, tears streaming down her face. "Goodbye, father," she said as a slight gray-haired man boarded. The senior governor paused in the doorway for a split second, and then, perhaps heavily, continued up the steps without looking back. He took a seat on the opposite side of the bus. Lena turned away and roughly whisked her tears from her cheeks. The bus drove off, and a giant black iron door in the death farm whined enough for the chained children to enter single file. Inside were four enormous illuminators robed in black. Their heads were covered in cloth, but their beady red eyes pierced into the already frightened souls of children. Lena now appeared to be the only calm one. She held her head high as a long chain of children walked inside. "What are they?" Megan gasped and reached awkwardly for Alex's hand. Alex grabbed Megan's hand and gave it a frightened squeeze. "I don't know," he whispered. He felt like his chest was going to collapse, breathing in and out slowly. Alex closed his eyes for a moment and shivered as the gate groaned and closed with a loud clang, the lock clicking automatically on the other side, separating them from Quill forever. The eliminators took the ends of the chains and trudged slowly, the children following. They were in a small cement yard. A gray stone building stood before them, and streaming black lake boiled beyond it. Alex shuddered. "That's where they'll do it to us." The oily stench seemed to grow stronger as they shuffled across the broken cement, past bundles of burned-looking weasels. Toward the building, it was more desolate, than most wasted section of Quill. Even the sky was clouded with gray. Although there was no barbed wire, just open sky, none of them have ever seen an uninterrupted sky before. Everything was eerie silent, but for the clanking of chains and scuffle of shoes as the unwanted moved forward. The seconds felt like hours. When the eliminators stopped walking and turned their eyes to the sky, Alex followed their gaze. The other children looked up too. From the sky over the boiling black lake, a large bird, or something, slowly approached. The eliminators seemed to be waiting for it, and they stood, huge, hulking, silent, as a four-legged winged creature landed with an ominous thud directly in front of them. Elimination. Chapter 4. The creature was an extraordinary, beautiful, yet frightening tortoise with long wings that were covered with glistening white feathers, tipped in black. The mosaic-shelled beast stood on all four legs, stretching out its neck to view its audience, and even on all fours was more than half as tall as the smallest child, Lena. The spectacular creature bobbed its head to the eliminators, and then it looked each unwanted in the eye. In turn, each dropped his gaze and instinctively drew back as far as his chains would allow. After a few moments, the tortoise appeared satisfied. When it spoke, to utter shock of the children, it was the deep, agonizing, slow voice. "Well, come," the tortoise said, low and grim, and the word caused a chill to run up Alex's spine. "We've been," it paused for breath, "pecking you." Sam Head, the glaring boy from the bus who had been silent all this time, muttered an oath under his breath and raised his fist ready to fight. But Alex and the others were fearfully mesmerized by the odd creature that stood before them. What was this thing? Was it going to attack? What did it have to do with the decrepit farm that contained nothing but the smell of death? They watched the tortoise, almost afraid to look at its grim face, but not quite able to look away either. The tortoise blinked a long, slow blink, craning its long neck to look behind it. It lifted its round front legs and held it to its mouth, as if to cup its words. "Marcus," it called out in a slow, grim voice, "it's time." What in the name of Quill is it doing? Alex wondered. A moment later, a tall, thin figure emerged from the gray building and lifted his head. All at once Alex felt dizzy, as the space around him seemed to swirl, the oily lake whirling with gray building, and the wall behind them until everything was spinning charcoal haze. He blinked rapidly, and wondered if he and all the children had already been eliminated, if it was over. Nothing on his body hurt yet the charcoal blur of everything around him now faded, softened, coiled to white, and then grew steadily brighter, nearly blinding him. This was nothing at all like what Alex had expected to feel when immersed in the great lake of boiling oil. Megan, who could not help herself, cried out, "What's happening?" Alex squeezed her fingers, more to assure himself than her that they were still together. He sucked in a breath, but couldn't answer. Another moment later the white melted and color emerged. The small, desolate lot had transformed into a huge world, so full of color Alex could hardly see. The sun shone in a serene sky. The cement turned to a lush carpet of grass, and the water fountains emerged from the earth. 1,000 trees sprouted and grew up to full height, scattered far and wide. The boiling lake softened in a calm sea of blues and greens, and the single gray building expanded into an enormous, sprawling fieldstone mansion. The gnarled weeds at the children's feet wavered and transformed into wild animals, both common and fantastic. Even the Eliminators transformed. Their black cloth coverings disappeared, and all four grew even taller, with animal-like heads and sleek long necks that melded into huge scout-strong bodies like Unwanteds had never seen. The newly transformed Eliminators were covered in a fine layer of shimmering black hair that reflected the sunlight, and their previously frightening red eyes grew kind and intelligent, a rich amber brown. As the Unwanteds gawked, the shackles on their arms unbuckled and fell to the ground. They took in a collective awed breath, rubbed their sore wrists, and checked to see if the others were all still there. The tall, thin figure had emerged from the gray building, now mansion, was a man dressed in flowing, multicolored robe. He strolled toward them. A fluffy shock of white hair stood up on his head as if he had just been struck by lightning. "Greeting, friends," said the man, his voice warm and a clear, pealed like present-sounding bell. He opened his arms wide. I am Marcus today. Welcome to our team." He paused, touching his finger to his lips, and then smiled brightly. "Tell me, children, how does it feel to be eliminated?" Dun dun dun! Mr. Today, Chapter 5. It was as if Alex and the others were mute, and indeed the colors of Magical Place alone would have been enough to shock any Quiltilian, for Quill was bland world whose brightest color was the green of leafy trees in the nursery. And guys, if you don't know what mute, because he said it was as if Alex and the others were mute, that means basically mute is another word for can't speak. So like if you mute the TV or something, you can't hear anything. That's kind of what it is for your voice. If you're mute, you can't talk. And you can't be heard, obviously, if you can't talk. In Quill, all the trees were confined to one place so that no one would get notions about introducing such a bright color into the housing quadrants. But here in Earth Routine, all the colors felt warm, from a deep foresty green of plants to soothing blues of the sky and sea. The strand of beach was not dingy gray like the cement walls around Quill. It was clean and white, with tiny bits of silver and gold sparkling in the sunshine. A cool breeze whisked away the odor of burning oil from the children's noses and replaced it with the musky fragrance of sea and the woods. The children breathed the wonderful scent, hesitating at first as its strangeness and then nearly gulping in it. For several of them had to be holding their breath for quite some time. Not one of the Unwanteds could even look around to ask, "Is this a joke?" because Quill was a serious place, and it was doubtful that any of these 20 even thought a joke possible. Most likely 19 of them had never known the word joke, and the one that had known it most surely had been reported to the governors and thus ended up here, whatever here was, if not the death farm. Anyways, I'm gonna leave you on a cliffhanger. You're not gonna find out where they are till you tune in again and listen to our next little reading with Keiko. And we're gonna be doing this a lot. If you guys enjoy, this is gonna be the first book that we all read together. We accomplished 23 pages for you guys in 30 minutes. So if you go at this pace and read 23 words a minute or whatever, this could go a long way for you. I'm sorry about that little group call. I'm gonna go answer though. I love y'all so much. Thanks for watching, and bye.